I'm Cubby Culbertson. I'm going to kind of, the next couple of minutes, give you a little history on how SmartPhoneMedic got started. And then Demetrio really just pretty much runs the day-to-day operations. We have one other partner, which I'll discuss in a second. So a little about us, and then anything you have questions about what we do, we'd be glad to try to answer them. About 5 years ago, about 5.5 years ago now, I have a daughter who lives in Atlanta, and she called me and said, Dad, I got a new business for you. And I said, I don't need any new businesses, but I am interested in what your concept is. And she said that she had broken her phone or dropped it in water and taken it into AT&T, and they came back and said, $300 or $400, takes 5 to 6 days, lose all your information. And she was walking out, and the representative from AT&T gave her a card and said, why don't you see if these people can look at it and fix it? So I think it was on a Saturday morning, so she drives the other side of Atlanta on a Saturday morning. And she says when she gets there, there was people lined up out the door to get in, so I got my attention a little bit. I thought, well, I'm interested in any business that's got people lined up to get in the door. So she goes in, and they look at her phone, and 30 minutes, an hour later, they fixed it for like $79. And so she's thinking, okay, $79, get it back in an hour, $300 or $400, all this has to work that goes on. So I said, well, that is an interesting concept, and nobody here in Columbia, to my knowledge, is doing that, but that's probably just not where I am in life right now. So about 3 weeks later, a good friend of mine named Robbie Reisher, Robbie hung wallpaper for 25 years, came in one day, and we were sitting in the office talking. He said, you know anything about phones? I said, nope. I pulled out this old phone that I had that barely worked. And he had a similar experience. He had gone to Charlotte, and they had said it was like $300 or $400. And Robbie said, I brought my phone back and took it apart and fixed it. And he said, I hadn't found one yet I can't fix. And I said, really? That's interesting. I told him the story about my daughter, and I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I have 5 children, and 4 of my children are grown now, but they were all in college at the time. And so I said, I could open up a business just with my 5 kids breaking phones. So we'll do this. This is in April of 2009. I said, well, over the summer, if any of my kids break their phones and have friends who break their phone, I'm going to send them to you. And if you can fix them, then my office is about 2 blocks from the university. I said, I guarantee you 25,000 kids come back in around August 15th, and I guarantee they break phones. So sure enough, over the summer, Robbie fixed some phones, and we hung a little sign out in front of Andy's Deli. Andy's a friend of mine, and we fixed phones. They kind of come in, and Andy would send them to us. And Demetrio was working with me on another business I'm involved with. Immediately started picking up with Robbie and kind of learning how to fix phones and things like that. So what Robbie would do was hang wallpaper during the day and come in after 5 o'clock, and we'd start fixing these phones. And sure enough, over maybe 4 or 5 month period, it got to be where at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in my little office building, people would be lined up out our doors and down our steps, coming picking up the phone. So I had other tenants in my building saying, "God, I need to get find a real place." So we ended up moving down to 5 Points to a mattress store down there. A friend of mine had some mattress store, and we probably had maybe 200 square feet in the back of a mattress store. You couldn't find us with a compass. I mean, you literally had to go look for us to find us. And sure enough, they come through the mattress store, and Demetrio was still working with me part-time, and Robbie was still, at this point, he had pretty much shifted to fixing phones. And then we hired, I guess we hired with somebody else, maybe 6 months into it or something. And then it got to be we were outgrown that space, and we moved up to Gervais Street 2 years ago. And in 1801 Gervais Street, we've got about 1,100 square feet there, and probably 3 or 4 employees at the time then. And then we opened out in Sand Hills, and then we've opened at Fort Jackson. We have a location of Fort Jackson. We're real close to signing something out in Lexington right now. We'll probably end up in the Harbison area. So for Columbia, that's kind of what we do, who we are. We fix iPhones, we fix iPads. I mean, lots has happened over the last 5 years in technology. We were approached about 2.5 years ago by a group who wanted to franchise it. And actually about 3 years ago they came to us, and we were about 3 months away from being our 2-year anniversary. And I said, I don't think I have an interest in that, but I can promise you, I have no interest in doing anything before 2 years, because everything I had read said that 90% of the businesses fall within the first 2 years from lack of capital, or they grow too fast. And I said, we may fall, but I'm not going to fall for the obvious reasons. So we made it through our 2 years, and sure enough, they came back to us and said, we'd like to talk to you about this. And I gave them several reasons why I didn't think it was any way possible that we were going to franchise it. And the last one was, I said, if we did it, we're not going to personally guarantee notes, we're not going to put money in it. If we did it, and two of the things I said, but the real problem you got, I was 54 years old at the time. I said, if I was 34, I'd probably have an interest in that, but I'm 54. And I just don't think that's where I am in life. But if you can get around those, you can come back and we'll talk to you. And they were out of Charlotte. So they came back and said, you know, really want to talk to you and would like to, you know, consider pursuing this. And they referenced one of the guys who was behind it, and his name is Martin Sprock. And I said, who is Martin Sprock? And they said, well, he's the guy that really is interested in this. He keeps pushing to say, y'all go figure out who Cubby Garberson is, figure out those guys, what they do. We want to take their concept. And I said, well, you know, what has Martin ever done? Who is he? And he said, well, you ever heard of Moe's? And I said, well, yeah, I've heard of Moe's. He said, well, he started Moe's. I said, well, okay, that's a pretty good on those names. He said, yeah. I said, what else has he done? He said, he started his Planet Smoothie. And he said, heard of that? Yeah, I heard of that. He said, you ever heard of Flying Biscuit, which is where we eat when we go to Atlanta? And I said, yeah, I've been to Flying Biscuit. He said, how about, what was the Monkey Joe's? You ever heard of that? And I said, yeah, I heard of Monkey Joe's. I said, oh, I ain't got all day. How many of these things have you started? He said, he's done 7 of these. So I said, well, if Martin has an interest in it, we'll call. So sure enough, Martin comes in the next week. We meet. We kind of pitch our concept, what we were doing. And when we got through, Robbie, our partner, said, Cubby, you know, you basically told him everything we do. And what prevents him from going out and just doing what we do? And I said, look, we wouldn't even go to Newberry. I mean, you think we're going to Houston? We're going to Houston, Texas. There's not a chance if he wants to do it. So it is interesting. They did come in. They structured the deal for us. We have a franchise division that's franchising now kind of all over, and but we have the right to the Columbia election, about a 40-mile radius of the State House. Just an interesting note of Martin. Martin has about, well, this was 3 or 4 years ago, Martin was in 72 different businesses. He has everything, film companies, he's in really, Martin's 45. He has a resume about like we do. He barely got through college. He, you know, failed his first job or two, was working at a bar and saw this niche for Moe's, and you know the rest is history. Mark's an interesting guy, very gifted. But quick story, I love the story when I'd asked him, I said, Mark, how in the world do you manage involved in 72 different businesses? I mean, you know, I have a fraction of that, and I can't even hardly figure out what I've got. I said, are you just a technology guru? You have to be to do something like that. And he pulls out this flip phone. And he said, I've heard there's something called texting. He said, no clue how to text. He didn't have an email address. Didn't do any of that. In fact, my son Chandler's here. I've told this story several times. Mark was down one time, and Chandler was with us, and Mark said, I'm going to ride by your Sandhill store on the way out. You know, how did I get there? And because he's going back to Charlotte. So I pull out this napkin, and I said, well, you go up 77, you take a right on this road, you go to a red light, and I started there. And Chandler's just laughing, thinking, unbelievable. These two guys who own these businesses do this, they wouldn't have a clue how to get on the phone and show how to do it by GPS, but we still use a napkin. But we are in the location now, the 3, we're looking at a 4th, we'll probably do a 5th. On the franchise side, we're involved, not day-to-day involved, we're involved as much as they need us to be. But Robbie, I kind of handled probably the marketing and the financial side. Robbie, who is our other partner, Robbie Reacher, is total technical. He can just work. I mean, all he does is he can fix anything. So most of the technical people come through Robbie. And what I say about Demetrio, a lot of other things, Demetrio is the glue. Demetrio knows how to fix phones. He does anything to do with social media, anything to do with anything. Demetrio knows every part of the business. I don't know anything about the technical side. Robbie has never looked at a P&L statement and doesn't care and never asks questions. He just works on it. Demetrio, it does not run without Demetrio. So we felt like when we were asked to come pitch to this, we're not looking for anything. We're not looking for backers. We don't need money. We're in a pretty good position. Other than
don't need money.
Well, we always need money. Sorry. But if anybody had an interest in franchising, and if anybody had an interest in just kind of what goes on the day-to-day, how our parks work, or anything like that, I mean, it's been a huge learning curve. And I will say, Martin's position, when he came in, because I said to somebody, I said, Mark, you don't need us, go start it. And he said, Moe's is the only thing I started. Everything else, I see a concept when it's just started, and I can take things to the next level. That's my gift, that's my passion. But he said, you know, what you learned in the first 2 to 3 years, I'm willing to pay for to get it.